In the world of B2B FinTech, the typical content marketing tactics don't always apply. A lot of content marketing advice out there is actually more for software companies, where customers are typically worth under 5K a year and the perceived risk for the buyer is often on the lower end. But in B2B FinTech, we're often dealing with 6 or 7-figure deals, sales cycles that take over 6 months, and integrations that can also take months. And the risk for the buyer is a lot higher as well. So these are not people who are going to convert after seeing one ad or even one blog post. They often require 30, 40, or even 60 touch points before converting. Which is why in this space, it makes more sense to do account-based marketing, where you've got a list of accounts, you create very personalized marketing, and target them specifically in a joint effort with sales. And in this scenario, what is the role of content? What kind of content should you be producing? And how do you know it's working? How do you track success? That's what we discuss in today's episode with Scott Henderson, Senior Digital Marketing Manager at Galileo, and Rosa McGoldrick, Head of Corporate Communications at Galileo as well. Scott has extensive experience in fintech, starting off his journey in the financial advisor space, followed by building his own personal finance website, much like what I did actually back in the day. He then went on to do marketing for a B2C fintech called Cube Money, and he's now at Galileo. Rosa also has extensive experience more on the financial services side, having worked almost 20 years at American Express before moving over to SoFi, which then acquired Galileo. As for Galileo, they are a fintech that enables banks, brands, and other fintechs to build financial solutions through open APIs, issuing cards, and other financial products. They've actually been around for over 2 decades and one of the first fintechs to appear. And in this episode, we talk about content's role in the sales cycle, how analyzing sales goals has helped them come up with content topics, how they're using content for sales enablement with Confluence as a repository, using proprietary data in a cost-effective way to improve their long-form content like reports, and how they're using AI and LLMs to localize their content to other languages. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. You're listening to the Market Like a FinTech podcast. My name is Araminta, MD at Mint Studios and partner at the FinTech Marketing Hub. And with this podcast, my aim is to explore the strategies and tactics that top marketers around the world use to grow FinTech companies. We have discussions about how to navigate compliance, the intricacies of marketing technical products, and targeting hard-to-reach ideal customers. All of that while living the startup life. I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get started with just a round of introductions. If you could both introduce yourselves and say what it is that you do at Galileo, and we'll start with that.
I'm Rosa McGoldrick. I've been with Galileo 3 years. I head our Galileo communications, so PR, media relations, exec visibility, and also content. So content marketing and media partnerships.
Yep, and I'm Scott Henderson. I've been at Galileo for 3.5 years at this point, and I'm the Senior Manager of Digital Marketing. So that entails content, website, advertising, video distribution, all that kind of fun stuff. And I've been in the fintech industry for about almost 6 years now. Love the marketing field within fintech. I think it's a lot of fun.
Nice, awesome. So yeah, content, you're both kind of involved in content. So clearly it plays quite a big role in Galileo's marketing strategy. So yeah, talk to me about that. Like, how do you see content? What is the role in your marketing? And then kind of what kind of content are you focused on creating?
Sure. I mean, we feel like content is really critical to helping us both on awareness and sales pipeline. I think Scott would agree. For us, it's definitely not just a marketing asset. It's core to how we connect to modern B2B buyers, many of which we've learned are 70% through their journey before they even touch a salesperson or touch a possible supplier or vendor. So we really feel like content plays an early role in early stage decision making. So you got to really bring them in. And then that's how also we stand out from the competition.
And what kind of content is that? Like, you know, we're in the B2B world here, payments, issuer processing.
Well, we have a very integrated approach, and I want Scott to chime in here too, but it's really for us around 6 areas. So it's like media relations, exec visibility, analyst relations, social media, content, our content marketing, all of it on our site, as well as, even the media partnerships where we are, where they are, right? Not necessarily on our site. So Scott, chime in here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what we're trying to do is solve problems and provide solutions for our prospects and for our clients, right? And as many areas and different places we can share that content that helps address either specific questions or specific needs they're looking for. We try to help educate them as much as we can so that when they do get to a sales rep, they've been informed about a lot of the general basic information, and then they can help make a better decision as they work with sales on what exactly it is they're looking for.
Some of our data finds that, and it's really something we're saying all the time to our executives too, that it takes a enterprise buyer 13 to 30 touch points and multiple stakeholders to really get to that point, right? So that they're committed to a sale.
So yeah, 13 to 30 touch points is definitely true. How do you track that in any way? Like, I know I've been recently going down this rabbit hole and there's different tools that do different things, but it's hard sometimes when you're talking to leadership and you can just say that and they'll be like, yeah, whatever, show it to me, really, like prove it to me. How would you try and communicate that to leadership, that those number of touch points, and do you track it in any way if you can?
Yeah, we do our best to track across different channels and different touch points as we can. We do have some tools that give us more like attribution information, and we can see what was the first touch point that somebody had when they first came in, what other pieces of content did they engage with down the funnel. And then we also have like number of different people within a company, right? So we look at it from an account perspective, like how many individuals within an account are engaging across the platform. And I can easily get up into 13 to 30 range as we're working a deal with all the content we've put out and the different channels that they engage with.
Yeah, I think influencing our senior leaders is not that complicated because, and Scott, tell me if you agree with this, they see it real time. Like we're close to a prospect finalizing things and they have 6 more questions that you're answering. Even once, they're in the throes of sales, it's an extended process and it's group buying, right? It's not one influencer, it's multiple stakeholders that you have to influence. So I think that's not at least on our side, that's not such a tough conversation because the sales team and everyone around them, our senior leaders, see it too, that it's not a quick close when it comes to enterprise.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of tools, are you using a tool like Dream Data or is it just Salesforce? How are you able to track and see kind of what maybe the pieces of content are that people are reading?
Yeah. So the different things we use is Salesforce is our primary source of truth. So we've got a lot of data flowing into that, but we also use Marketo as our CRM, and then a tool called Visible that helps with touchpoint attribution. And so between those 3, we can get a pretty good picture of how people are engaging with our content.
Yeah, amazing. But how do you spell that? Visible?
Visible, Bizible.
Okay, now that's a new one that I haven't heard of. Want to check out. Okay, so yeah, you create a lot of different types of content, and one of the main goals is, increase those touch points, ensure that there's lots of content for your target audience to read and to consume. How do you put together the strategy behind that in terms of what topics to focus on? What do you do, a report or a blog? Like, how do you kind of look at the overarching strategy that you're putting together and like deciding on that?
I jump in and say, look, our objective is that the content has to be helpful, discoverable, trustworthy. We're trying to be visible in all the places they are, include, of course, in our website, be a useful resource, credible and top of mind, right? So that's a lot of goals there. But I think one thing that's core is that we really focus on use cases and we really are about the buyer needs and business goals. So let me give you an example. In banking, core modernization, right? That's like a topic that is very common, especially for the larger banks, of how they modernize their back end to be faster, digital first for their customers. Something we're working on right now is how does a CTO sell in core modernization to their organization. Those are the types of things that are really going to be a differentiator because it makes them think along the lines, we're solving their needs because they're the ones that have to sell in this multi-year, multi-million dollar technology buy. So that's not easy.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the way you can kind of think of Rosa and I is she's helping manage the relationship with our PR firm where they're really digging in to understand like what is our content strategy for the year. They're talking with leadership. They're helping inform what the content strategy is going to be. Whereas for me, I kind of look at it and help support that by looking for trends or keywords that people are searching for that we might be able to help. And so I'll help inform the strategy a little bit in terms of, hey, Rosa, I think we see an opportunity here to rank for a keyword or drive organic traffic, in this way. That'll just be a small piece of the content strategy that we try to create a blog post or content around to help drive some of that long-term traffic. And then, like Rosa said, putting together case studies and ebooks that we can use as a lead generation tool to help our prospects get that extra layer of information that they otherwise wouldn't get unless they gave us their email or something.
A great example of that would be our FBO, right, Scott?
Yeah.
You came to me like there was a definite need in the marketplace to really understand FBO accounts, not how Galileo alone manages, but just the broader why they're important, people, how you should think about it. And so that was one that Scott tapped me, and it's definitely gotten great metrics because a lot of people want to understand that piece.
Yeah. And that was a fun piece of content. That was at a time where, you may be familiar with this, when Synapse started to go under and people were wondering like, well, how did their business model operate between the sponsor bank? And really the question came down to the ledger and how they operated there for the benefit of accounts, which we call FBO accounts. We didn't really have a good piece around educating someone on what does that actually mean? How do they work? How does Galileo operate when it comes to those? And so we put together a long form article around that, and it immediately started ranking, and we've seen good consistent traffic coming from it since then. And we've tried, with other keywords in a similar phrase, like bin sponsorship, things in banking, and we've seen some good results that way with content.
Yeah, interesting about FBO. How do you kind of stay on top of what maybe those important, interesting topics are? Do you subscribe to newsletters? Are you just following certain people online? How do you know a little bit what your ideal customers are interested in?
Yeah, we definitely work on it as a team. There's a lot of different things. We're actually going through this new exercise about pain points and triggers. So we as a team have a lot of each of our specific areas. We're looking at what are the pain points or triggers that our prospects have that we can now help make an informed decision on to help answer those or help direct them in the process. So for my area, I'm looking at keywords, keyword research within Google. We've even gone as far as analyzing some of our sales calls to see what prospects are actually saying when they come and meet with sales. So they might say something that we've never thought of before. And so it's hard for us to get outside of our box and think like, actually, no, they want the same thing. They're just saying it in a different way. So if we can create some content around how they speak about it, it can usually resonate with them better.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the news and influencers, Simon Taylor. We have actually a long list of those that are in our industry that are constantly giving us insights on that. And then the other thing I'd say, which we're all guilty of not doing enough of, Scott is better at it, I'm trying to get better at it, is being close to sales. Scott is really good at that. You get mired in your day-to-day, having to produce, but I'm making a real concerted effort, and it really helps because it's critical. Like they're the ones on the front line, and you get a lot of insights from them when they have the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think sales recordings or just talking to sales is my favorite way to get, as an SEO agency ourselves, we've actually started playing around with using AI so usually we would listen to a sales call, and as you're listening, you're like, oh, this could be interesting. But then with that recording, you can also use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to extract even more ideas. And there's some really interesting prompts that you can use to get more ideas. There's also a couple of websites, one called Write Sonic, for example. So that's an interesting use case for AI, using it to extract even more keywords or ideas from sales calls. But yeah, I totally agree. Sales teams are the best because they're like actively talking to their customers every day.
Right.
And Scott, talk about LLMs and how all our content is in LLM optimized.
Tell me about that. I'm very curious.
Yeah, so we've been obviously keeping a close eye on what's happening in AI as well, and we would use either our sales platform is Gong. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but we also will use different tools like either Gemini or ChatGPT to help analyze some of those sales calls and also help inform our strategy. But what we noticed in the 2 years that we've been tracking this is in 2024, we basically saw no traffic as LLMs as the source. And we started to see it a little bit in 2024. So we actually created a dashboard within our marketing dashboard that shows us, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Llama. So these different LLMs, it's like way higher than it was last year. We're now really starting to see not only people probably get the majority of their questions answered within the chatbot itself, but are actually still clicking through some of the links to come to our website. And so we're able to see that source. So our organic search in Google has not been impacted. I think a lot of people predicted like, hey, in 2025 and 2026, 25% of your organic traffic is going to get a hit. We haven't seen that yet, but we're just seeing an increase in traffic from LLMs. And so what we're trying to do is figure out how to optimize our content, not just for Google and SEO, but more broadly for LLMs in general, and make it as useful as we can for the LLMs to pick it up and help answer questions around how we want them to think about our products and solutions.
Yeah, that's an entire topic in itself and something that I'm also going deep into. I think one interesting thing, I'm curious, as you're optimizing this, are you optimizing more for top, middle, or bottom of the funnel? What kind of content are you trying to optimize? Because what we've been seeing is that if the thing about top of the funnel, someone who's looking up, what is issuer processing or something like that, it's very unlikely that the LLM is going to source you because they're just looking for information. They're not looking for a product or solution. But if they're looking for someone who can help me with card issuing, they're actually looking for a website. They're actually looking for a source. And then, hopefully the Galileo would then turn up. And so what we're seeing is actually, we've always been focused on bottom of the funnel content, but now it's now more important than ever, because if you want to appear when someone's looking for a specific solution, then you need to optimize, you need to create that kind of content. So I wonder if you've been experimenting with that, and have you played around with optimizing both bottom and top, or what have you seen?
Yeah, we've definitely seen, I think it's easier for us to kind of optimize for top of funnel and try to answer some of those basic questions. It feels like it's more of uncovering a lot more as we get more down towards the bottom of the funnel. But we also we're doing some things actually right now to answer this specific question of like, what is top of funnel, middle, and bottom of the funnel? And we're definitely going to try to lean in more towards the bottom of the funnel, which we can always improve.
Yeah, well, really interesting. So let's go back to your sales team. I think one of the challenges that we often see when it comes to content is how can we encourage the whole team to use it? And you mentioned that you're trying to get as close as you can to the sales team, and multiple touch points. Your leadership is seeing that it takes multiple emails and all of that to close a deal. Where does content play in all that? How does your sales team use it? How do they use it? How have you found they prefer it, in the sense that how do you encourage them to use it as much as possible? What have you found has worked there?
Well, one thing I'll chime in on is that besides, of course, all our content is on our website, but we also, for sales alone, have like a sales library and organized differently so they can really see banking versus IVAs and our connected product and like kind of different areas. And then Scott, you want to talk about Confluence, where we have some other more deep dives, right, of our offerings and product offering. So that's one differentiator, I would say.
Rosa brought up her sales library, and it's honestly an incredible document. I don't know how many times we get compliments from people that are like, wow, how did you guys put all of this content together? So Rosa does a really good job of keeping everything in one place that's easily accessible based on topic for all of our sales folks. I think that's been super useful. And then we also have an internal tool called Confluence, where it's for our team to get up to speed on how a specific product or solution works, and as many questions and answers as we can around it, so that they kind of feel armed and ready to go for sales calls and product calls. So it's not like every sales rep is on top of using all of our content. Obviously, we have to help them see what something can be used for and try to make it as easy for them to use it, whether that's putting an email together for them so they can send it out to a prospect. But we do have a couple of sales reps that are really good at using all of our content and sending it to prospects themselves and adopting it to what they do. But it's definitely something that we're also working on as well, is how do we get as much of our content to be in the hands of sales.
Yeah, one thing I've been doing lately is some of our content is bylined by them, which really makes, I know they're going to syndicate their own points of view and blogs too. So we marry the two, like content I might already have in the works with their tips and tricks. So we just started a little bit of that. But look, we are struggling with social media, like getting them to push through social. And we have some considerations up our sleeve. I mean, we did have a tool that did that before and it wasn't so used, but I think we're going to revisit that again. And I think it really comes from leadership. You know, our CRO is really making sure they're using Salesforce the right way. And we only use Salesforce and the reports on Salesforce. We're not like creating other documents. That's a complete waste of their time. And I know Gong is going to allow us to do a lot of different go-to-market campaigns for them. That's going to make it a lot easier and turnkey. So some of the content will be there. And we'll be pushing those out as well, and that's helpful. So, but we're still, you know, we still have our areas where we're pushing through and learning and iterating. That's the thing about content. I think it's always about iteration. You've got to continue to push and evolve and see what works and try new things. So that's why I'm so proud of the work Scott has done on LLMs, because I feel like we're ahead of other companies on that.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy how just making content easy to access can change things. There's a tool, if anyone listening needs one, that's called FlockJ. And its only role is to just, you upload the content and it makes it very easy for salespeople to send it. Also, you can have checklists and stuff and people can say, okay, I read this, I read that part. And actually, I was looking for a tool that someone else on our podcast, Will from Comply Advantage, it's called Octopost. And it does a little bit what you just mentioned. Have you heard of it? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because I was just wondering, that kind of it uses AI to create social media posts. Is that the one that you have tried already?
That's the one we used. Like anything, it's a behavior, right? That you have to really instill in sales. And I think we're going to go back to evaluating that tool. But, you know, there's something to be said too. While so many different tools are great and productive, you've got to be careful you don't over index on the tools for sale. It's too much, you know? I've been on some training calls where they're just like, so you've got to really, it takes time, it takes commitment, but you've got to also like limit how many tools you give them, because it's not fair. Sometimes it's not fair.
Yeah, and as a marketing team, sometimes what we found ourselves is providing a lot of the training for the whole revenue team and for the sales team, because like if we're going to adopt a tool, we want to make sure they know how to use it, they're familiar with it, and that sometimes takes learning and training. And so we try to help enable our sales as much as we can with tools. Like last week, we just did a training on how to get the most out of Gemini and email and Drive and all that kind of stuff that we have built into our Google Suite. So
very cool. You're like at the forefront of LLMs and stuff, so that's great. I actually wanted to talk to you about reports and ebooks. So the people you're targeting fintechs mostly, is that right? Or what are the kind of entities that you're targeting?
Well, definitely large financial institutions, right? Yeah. So the top banks in the US, top banks across Latin America. Fintechs, as you said, yes. And then brands as well. You might have seen our announcement with Wyndham on a co-branded debit product with Wyndham, and we have other announcements coming up later in the year. But that's kind of a new territory we're updating analysts on, and, you know, kind of building content around that offering as well to demystify a little bit for brands the benefits, you know, of of really looking at co-branded debit, where a lot of them have credit products already. These large brands like Wyndham, it's like debit, the power of debit, and then supplementing their credit products with debit offerings as well. And by the way, younger generations want debit. They don't want to revolve. Also, there's a whole, if you look at hotels or other travel entities, they basically use debit for purchase, but then their rewards offerings don't include debit. So that's what we want to tap into.
So yeah, I was going to ask about like ebooks and reports. What have you found resonates with your audience, fintechs versus FIs, for example? Do you find that the big banks are really keen on reports, whereas the fintechs aren't so much, that kind of thing? And also, have you been trying out LLMs or AI to help with those reports? And have you had any success there?
Yeah, I feel like the reports, one of the ones we did last year, you're closer to this than I am, Rosa, but the one we did on Datos, where we did our own proprietary survey where we answer our own questions to a lot of financial institutions and consumer banking. I feel like that's been one of our best performing ebooks that really helps answer a lot of questions for our financial institution segment. But definitely, I feel like since we've been so well established and well known in the industry for so long around fintech, that a lot of our fintech ebooks in the past have done pretty well. And then, like Rosa mentioned, we've been moving into a new segment the past year or two on these large, publicly traded companies that want to offer some sort of embedded finance feature, whether that's like a co-brand debit card or, buy now, pay later, or, increase their fraud detection. We've got solutions to help offer that. We have our campaigns that we put together as a team, and it's usually, if we do an ebook, it's geared towards a segment and a specific solution that we're trying to offer. And then to answer your question around LLMs and how we do that, yes, I think you always have to have humans in the loop when you put together stuff like this. I think we take that very serious. We are ultimately responsible, right, for everything that we put together. We use LLMs as more of like an efficiency tool to help us strategize and think through different maybe things we wouldn't have put in an ebook or a piece of content, and not just like use it to do all the work for us.
Yeah. When you have a gated piece of content, an ebook that's gated, LLMs can't really track that gated piece, right? So it's about the short form blog and the landing page that you have to really more optimize. But we've had really great traction with our ebooks, but Scott's right. Data is just a differentiator, right? It's not just any data. I mean, in this case, it was, consumer behaviors. So it really did play well, and it was extremely cost effective. You know what I mean? People have asked, and it's extremely cost effective when you sometimes work with Datos or some of these analyst firms that have great packages for like just adding 7 questions or 10 questions to their already planned survey. It could be very cost effective as long as you have a good team that can really draw those insights out and really bring them to market. So we have a good team that really does that with us. Our PR agency of record, the Fletcher Group, amazing. Of course, all of us on the marketing side. We're a small but mighty team.
Yeah, and one of the things we do to optimize some of these ebooks in case studies is we actually operate in multiple geographies. So we're in most, Latin America countries, and our primary countries, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina. And so we have to also make sure our content is not only translated, but localized as much as we can. LLMs will definitely help us with the translation process of taking the ebook, the landing page, the actual blog post, and helping us translate it and optimize it and localize it so that it's specific for those regions. And so that's definitely over the years. When I first joined Galileo, like that wasn't even a thing. Like we had to literally a human had to translate everything we do, but we've gotten our LLMs really optimized to like speak in our voice when we translate for the different content for the different regions.
Yeah, in fact, Scott's being shy, but he did our entire website in Portuguese. And
Wow.
we had our agency that's based in Brazil actually evaluate it, and he got very good marks from
Cool.
translating it to Portuguese. And it was, some nuances, but it was really well done. So it's amazing the efficiencies you can
Yeah.
get from
Definitely. It's such a great
that.
use case for
It
AI
really
is
is a
to
great-
help distribute or help reach. Well, so this was going to be one of my questions about, well, first of all, I wanted to go back to the Datos report. For those who are maybe not super used to, because we hear this a lot in the content space, like if you want to stand out, you need to do proprietary data, that kind of thing. So would you be able to walk through a little bit what that process was like? Because I think I totally agree with you. I think having that data makes such a big difference. And I think a lot of marketing teams wished they could do that, but they're not in a position to maybe put together a survey. They don't know where to start, that kind of thing. So how would you advise kind of that process to be?
Yeah, so look, I feel like these analyst firms will work with you. When I first came to Galileo, there was already in play a survey we were doing, and it was extremely expensive to some extent. That's when you do a full study, right? Soup to nuts with a third party. There are opportunities with analyst firms to do, let's say they're already doing a study on fraud and you add 5 questions. That's a lot more effective than doing a soup to nuts complete buy for a study. And you'd be surprised if you ask the right 5 to 10 questions, you could get almost as if you did a whole proprietary study, and it's a lot more cost effective. So I would say I've done them both, and I've spent a lot of money on the first one, and I actually got more out of the one with Datos. And then the brand name is good too, right? And we're considering other partners as well. I mean, as I had shared, analyst relations is part of our, go-to-market strategy, and so it clearly dovetails very succinctly in with the media relations and all the other facets of our content strategy.
So how did you know that Datos was doing a study already? Like, how did you know to then say, okay, can you add those 5 questions? What was that?
Because we went to them for costs on a proprietary study.
Oh, I see.
And then they had offered that up, and now we are the wiser for it, right? So now I'm not going to do proprietary studies. I'm going to see where I can connect to other studies they're doing. In fact, we're working with Javelin right now. It's a little different. Their study was already kind of done, but we're updating our fraud ebook, and we really want data. And so we're partnering with Javelin on that ebook and white paper study as well. And I think, for us, for the past 3 years, I've really been against white papers. They're
wow.
because they're too dense, and because you have to pull out the nuggets. In this world of Chat GPT, no one wants to read 20 pages of deep content, except for my fraud product owner. He definitely wants the white paper, and he probably knows most of what's in there already. But yeah, that's not high on my list because it's just too dense. I think they download it, but I don't know that they really get to it. So you've got to make it digestible. I mean, that's been that way for many moons. That's not a unique point of view.
So I guess my question is, how do you know, though, when Datos is doing a study on that specific, because they don't publish it, do they?
No.
Do they tell the world? So how did you know that they were doing a study and that you could piggyback on it?
It's all about planning, right? So all of us are talking to our media partners. We're talking to our analysts of what they have planned for the following year. And that's when you have to get in, after the summer, August, we're already planning at Galileo for the next year. Yeah. So those are really the critical months to get in and test those things and take chances on certain things.
No, I think that's just a really good way, because exactly what you said, right? It's often really expensive. And so piggybacking on someone else who's doing a study is maybe a good way to overcome that challenge a little bit.
And they're not like with any competitor, so it really plays well. And then you get discounts if you commit before the new year.
Good to know.
So they'll work with you too if you commit before the new year, because they're trying to get all their sales in.
Of course. No, I love it. This is really good. And then you said, okay, so Latin America, have you found, so you're translating as well, you're localizing. What have you found? How is it different selling issue processing to Latin American banks or fintechs? Like, do you find that the content has to be different, or as in like maybe different formats or different topics? How have you tried to approach that as like a small American team?
Yeah, so one of the things we started doing this year, Rosa and I and the team we've looked at what content has performed really well in the US over the past few years and how can we localize it for different countries. So for example, when we talk about instant payments or ACH rails or anything like that in the US, and we just simply translate that and put it in Brazil, nothing's going to happen because they're like, we don't know about these different things. We have to localize it for Pix, right? Pix system has been around for, over a decade in Brazil, and they've got that really, really well optimized for everyone that lives in that country. So like we could take a similar article that has performed well, but we have to localize it for whatever system or regulations or different things that they have within that country. And so we've been doing that this year where I don't know how many pieces of content, Rosa, we've done, but like at least 10 pieces where we've taken it and we've made it specific to Latin American countries.
Right.
And
Brazil, Argentina, Mexico.
Yep.
And how have you found it? Has it performed quite well, or are you still in the middle of it?
Yeah, we're still in the middle of it. I think it's still a little early to tell. I think we're putting a lot of content out there right now. Like the past couple of weeks, it feels like we've had a new piece of content coming out every day, which is awesome. But I think sometimes we usually look at it on a quarterly basis. We'll look back and say, okay, what content is actually performing well? And then we look at things on a rolling 2-year basis as well. We'll look at anything older than 2 years and see, does this make sense to still either try to optimize it, redo it, make it better, or just delete it, turn it off? Does it not had enough traffic for us to worry about? We're constantly looking at ways to improve and optimize. And with what we've done with localization this year, I think it's still a little too early to tell, but we're getting a lot of information out.
Nice.
And taking those premium ebooks as well, not Dados because that's US data, but other ones and really localizing it as well. The other thing, which I'll mention, which we're testing into is, and to some people, they might be surprised, we haven't been including our like third-party PR news on our site. Like we just haven't been doing that. And that's new territory we're testing into and seeing, because that's something that's often missed is that third-party credibility. And we have some great stories out there, but we're not necessarily putting them on our website. And you could do that without copyright issues, right? By clicking through. A lot of companies do that, and we just haven't in the past. But that's a new territory we're going to look into to see, because, we're driving a lot through our website. So we've, once we got them there, we want to make sure they see the complete offerings, thought leadership and news, not mentions, but like real articles that are a little bit more in depth that really promote Galileo offerings, etc. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
One last topic that I wanted to talk about is you've mentioned a few times like optimizing for Google and doing keyword research. It sounds like SEO is quite a big channel, or Google is quite a big channel for your traffic. That's interesting considering it's very B2B and you're targeting banks and all of that. So I'm curious if you could tell me a bit more, like how have you approached SEO and content for Galileo, and also any results that you can share or anything that you can share in terms of what you've seen has worked quite well in this space?
Yeah, so I actually love Google Search Console. I know that sounds maybe weird, but like I actually log into it every day and love seeing how our content is performing. So some of the things we look at to see if it's performing well is, impressions first and foremost, like how many times has it shown up in a search query? Then second is clicks, right? So how many times the clicks, which lead through the click-through rate. And then we also look at our position in Google. So we also have that built into our marketing dashboard where we can see which pages and keywords we're performing well for. But me personally, I've been using Google Search Console for years. I hope that they don't change anything like they did with Google Analytics and they just keep it the way it is, because it's a really useful tool for us to see. One of my favorite things is to see us moving up in the ranks for something specific. And so if we see like, hey, there's a piece of content that's showing some promise, we might actually look at using AI to help us identify maybe 10 to 20 other keywords that we could place within that specific piece of content so that we could boost our rankings in Google. And so that's been fun. And there's been a number of blog posts we've done that with for Google specifically. And this is just my belief. I don't know if I'll be true, but I do think that in the end, Google wins out. I think a lot of people are using ChatGPT right now, and it's been really useful, but I think SEO will just continue to evolve. I think Gemini is going to be a bigger piece of what we do as consumers and buyers, and even in the B2B space. I think it's just going to continue to evolve, and we have to evolve with it.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, if you're doing SEO really well, you're going to appear in LLMs as well. They're still very intertwined. To appear on LLMs, the LLM needs to scrape content. So the content still has to be created. Someone still has to do that. There's a few things like doing like best XYZ is maybe more important now because LLMs don't see the bias. For example, Galileo wrote an article like top issuer processors. The LLM can't tell that Galileo is one of the issuer processors, so maybe there's a bit of bias there. So that is one, like, there are some types of content that seem to be quite important. I think everyone's also talking about digital PR is more important than ever. So being mentioned in other websites, like what you were saying, Rosa, making sure that you're appearing in those publications. Sounds like you're doing all the right things, but I'm very interested to see also if you find that your target audience is using those LLMs a lot. I imagine they are, like most people, but I don't know if there's maybe a skew, like maybe financial institutions aren't using it as much as people who work at fintechs.
Yeah, I think right now the two biggest sources are ChatGPT and Gemini. I think ChatGPT right now for us is showing the most traffic source. But one other thing I'll mention that we're doing is not just looking at things in LLMs on a keyword basis, but from a brand perspective. Okay. So we're actually using a new tool called Revere. It's probably something you haven't heard of. It's a new thing here in the US, but it actually helps us analyze how Galileo is being perceived in all LLMs. So we could actually stack all 5 or 6 LLMs and ask one question, and it'll give us different answers because they're different large language models. But it's amazing to see what we can actually see what the pros and cons of Galileo are, what the strengths and weaknesses are. So we're actually using that to inform some of the content and decisions that we decide down the road. This is fairly new for us, but we can see like, okay, Galileo compared to the competitors actually struggles in these 3 areas compared to competitors. So we need to create some content around these specific areas. And it's this tool that's helping us identify what those strengths and weaknesses are. We also want to lean into our strengths, right? We want to understand what people out in the marketplace see us as good as and make sure that we lean into that. And all of it can be gleaned from LLMs. It's crazy.
Very interesting. So how do you spell Revere as well, just so listeners know where to find it?
Yeah, it's Revre, I believe.
Okay, perfect.
Right. An AI consulting firm that helps us Revere LLM.
There's so many of these. I'm using one called Peek, PEEC.ai, and that one's okay as well. But I think, there's a bunch of them like out right now, and I think we'll see which one's the best at the moment. But no, it's an interesting time to be testing these tools, and it sounds like you're doing all the right things, so that's really exciting. Proportion.
It's easy to feel like we're way behind everyone else. You think everyone else is doing something,
I know.
And then you realize actually, we're doing okay.
I mean, one of the questions I love that you brought up is like, what are some of the pitfalls? As I'm going through the list in my head, I'm like, I don't know. I'm still pushing in that direction, like, neglecting middle of the funnel. We got to do more on that. I think we're good at writing for buyers, not peers, but can be a slippery slope.
Sure.
Leading with features and not outcomes. Outcomes are really the holy grail. I already discussed under leveraging third-party credibility, right? Yeah. You're under leveraging that if it's not on your site and integrated. And that's a new consultant that's on board that we've been working with and brought that up. It's so basic, but we're going to test into that. And then, of course, the failing to localize is another thing that a lot of people, which, Scott gave an earlier good example, like that's a table stakes at this point. So those are some of the things we keep top of mind, but we're all guilty. I want to throw that out there that, we're all guilty. So just, we got to keep at it.
Well, I mean, from the companies that I talk to, it seems like you're at the forefront of this. So you're not at the back. Because I think a lot of people are still just playing around with ChatGPT, which is fine as well. But I think the key is really figuring out how to appear more on LLMs or how to use it to do what you said, localize, those kind of things. So kudos for that.
Yeah, I think I want to just reiterate what Scott said, because it's really our philosophy at Galileo. A human has to be in the loop.
Sure. That's so complex and technical and the stakes are high, right? And anything fintech, I think, financial services, there has to be a human to double check things.
Absolutely.
Cool. Amazing. Well, this has been super interesting. Thank you both. Let's end on my final question, which is, what is one piece, it could be multiple actually, of content that you're proud of at Galileo?
Hard to pick one. Scott.
I'll share one. If you do a Google search for open APIs in banking, the reason I say that one is because when I first joined Galileo, I knew the importance of long form content that ranks well. And I actually wrote the whole thing myself. And I got feedback from sales and from product and legal and compliance. It was a massive lift for me in one of my first projects, and it's performed well and it's been around. But I look back on that and I'm like, man, I couldn't imagine today spending the amount of time I did on that specific piece of content, because we're just able to do things a lot more efficient. So probably not the most efficient piece of content I've ever worked on, but one that I'm proud of because it was one of the first projects I did when I was here.
I love that one, Scott. And I remember that. I think for me, I'm going to bring up Card Launch 101 with Tearsheet, with actually a media partner. They're extremely respected in the industry. It's got video content. It's really about optimizing for embedded payments and really thinking about the card issuing side. And it performs so well. And when I got here, it's also a funny story, Scott. When I got here, it was, oh, Rosa, you're going to work on this piece. And it was new to me. You know, I had spent 19 years at American Express doing communications, PR, media relations, no content. So this was really new to me, and it has performed so well. In fact, we're refreshing it this year again. I just have a special place in my heart for that piece. So shout out to Tearsheet, who's a great partner for us too.
Amazing. We'll link those out so anyone can see them.
Oh, good.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Scott and Rosa, for jumping on. Really appreciate it. It's been really interesting to see the inside of your content as well as how you're using AI. I think there's a lot that we can learn from there. So I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, we're looking forward to having this published in the world.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. A lot of fun.
Thank you for listening. You can find show notes and information about guests at fintechmarketinghub.com/podcast. And finally, huge thanks to Araminta.tv for producing this podcast. We look forward to having you on our next episode.